Hello everyone. Good evening. Thanks for joining in on a Saturday. This is like the October version of C Tribe's webinar. And today we have with us Mr. Sanjib Dutta. He is the current head of supply chain management at RREC, which is Roadways, Runways, and Elevated Corridor Special Business Group at Larsen and Toubro. A veteran with 25 years plus experience across different projects in transportation space. He is someone I spoke to on LinkedIn and was very enlightened by the conversation that we had with regards to risk, with regards to contracts, and with regards to other project issues. Very passionate guy, who's working towards finding ways in which AI could probably help professionals like him in mitigating risk. So thanks a lot, sir, for joining us today for this session and taking out time. And really look forward to learning more about risks and contracts with you today.
Thank you, Chaitanya. Good evening to all. Primarily, I don't want to set out any more introduction part because of we know that there is a time constraint. But how I will cover this presentation is basically I have captured all real life contractual issues and I try to link every issues with some examples. But because of the time constraint, I will not cover everything here. I've taken a couple of examples to showcase. And while I'm discussing, I'll speak out the examples in the real life, how it happened, so that all of you understand that. The whole objective of this presentation is to understand that because I'm not a tech savvy guy, you people are much ahead of time and you are more familiar with this AI and other thing. But I feel that AI has got a lot of opportunities in this particular space of identifying risks, especially at the pre-bid stage rather than the post-bid stage. Post-bid stage, we have a bit of luxury of time, and having a post-bid risks understanding, already the business is getting affected. So it is necessary very much to identify those risks at the pre-bid stage. And in my opinion, that's the right and a more proactive approach for risk management. Because if you know from day zero what you are married with, it is always better to mitigate that. And in that context only, I feel, and also the pre-bid, you have a time challenge because the bids are coming, such a voluminous document to read by a manual. It's not possible always practically. So my first slide comes up with these 4 pictures, which primarily showing the nature of the risks in a EPC space. When you construct a bridge, you have a lot of hydrological challenges, the HFL data. When you talk about the right-hand corner, is a kind of in a hilly terrain, a road projects, you have a slope stability and a lot of geotechnical risks arising out of that project. The bottommost left corner is nothing but a Kannur International Airport, one of the unique tabletop runways being constructed by L&T only. It has got enormous number of geotechnical challenges because your 70-meter height of RE wall we have constructed there. And then you have this one on the road tunnel construction. And you all know that tunnels are inherently geologically vulnerable. So this slide shows basically the technical risk. But what we talk about is that beyond technical, there are many risks in this EPC space. And let me take you through the presentation and then see how we can go forward. I don't know why this slide is. There seems to be a bit of lag effect. And this is just generic aspects. You know, the large infrastructure projects suffer from significant under-management of risks throughout the life cycle of a project. As the management of risks isn't properly accounted for in their planning, it is not only restricted to contractor community. Rather, whole thing should start when you at the inception of the project itself, when you conceive the project itself. So the client has also a major responsibility. The basic problem in India that we don't allocate the risks, who can manage it better. And as a result of that, these are all blind spots and affected the sector. And there are various categories of risks, political risks, labor risks, client-related approval risks, various kind of things. Let me put a context setting straight away from a contract clause. You need not have to read entire thing, but read the bold lines and the underlines portion. It's the coming out from an Ministry of Road Transport standard EPC contract document. You see this disclaimer clause 6.1 is such fatal thing. It basically summarizing and talks about whatever data I have given, whatever document you are reading, I have no responsibility. Everything is your responsibility. You need to assess everything. And if it is going wrong, it's your risk. Now, having a clause like that, you imagine in an arbitration or a DRB, you are always in a back foot. Because when you go to the legal recourse of signing a contract like that, they said you are married to this project consciously. You signed this disclaimer. So client will always having an upper end in this, keeping this kind of clause. And these are the best of the legal minds possibly as drafted. And they know that having this clause can always safeguard themselves. Come what may, come what. You are putting into the back foot straight with this kind of clause. Now this 6.12, it reiterates further. If you read it, he's saying that you're accepting the risks of inadequacy, mistake, and everything, every damn thing of 6.1 above. And you're making sure authority is no more liable. And it also reiterates that no adjustment of cost or schedule completion date. That tomorrow when you come up with anything, any matter, these disclaimer clauses such dangerous. It adds with the third 6.13. He explicitly said all risks related should be the contractor scope. So that is how most of the government contracts in India is drafted. And it is evolved over a period of time. Client also learned in a hard way from the past, and they have tightened their belt in the contracts. Now come to another contract. This is from highway fraternity to a railway fraternity, dedicated freight corridor project. The essence is same, only the drafting are different. Again, it says that you are responsible for everything, correctness, sufficiency of your proposal, cover all risks, liabilities, everything set by complete. Don't come to me for anything. You have to deliver the project. This is a summarized meaning of this acknowledgement by contractor you are signed. Yeah. Now, when you have the similar DFCC, another component of the document, I just highlighted those portion because you will understand how much risky the business is. This underline of intended purpose, believe me, is a very dangerous clause. Very, very dangerous. It can cover many things. And I will give you an example. When you talk about an intended purpose, in later slide, I'll talk you about the fit for purpose clause. These are so dangerous. The English is so easy. In practical life, it can be devastating. This can be interpreted and can be expanded like anything. Especially, let me give you an example. Suppose if you are constructing a corridor, a rail corridor, already there is an Indian railway line already built and running. You are building a DFCC corridor parallel to that Indian railway line, for an example. Ultimately, by using the intended purpose or fit to purpose clause, they'll expect between Indian Railways and DFCC, if there is a turnout required to connect two lines, it is in your scope. It is not defined explicitly in the contract. Who will let the turnout? You are supposed to make your two lanes or whatever lines you are given. Already Indian Railways has constructed their line, it is a running line. So an intended purpose clause in practical life, it has happened as a dispute. So I am giving this example. They said, you read the fit to purpose and intended purpose clause. It means it is your scope that you have to clear the line out, because otherwise, how did the two parallel lines will get connected? That is how intended purpose clause can be expanded, and it can hit you like anything. That is why I'm telling that when you read the contract, you will never envisage a problem. That is why I'm giving you an example. Can AI understood this, or is it not possible technically also to understand? I feel if there is a lot of case being developed, possibly there will be a time 5 years, 10 years down the line when AI possibly will be able to start this. But the whole objective should go to that level that can I alert through this intended purpose, fit to purpose clause, which normally if you read will never going to give. Similar kind of clause under the design, that was under employer's requirement functional, it is under design. So reiterate the same clause. Your design should be fit for purpose, which actually covering that your scope should be such. Don't tell me that I can't connect it. If that doesn't serve this purpose, it is not completed. And remember, you are signing that all these inadequacy, everything is in your scope. Now, even to continuously reiterating, see, there is a consistency and a logic in the flow how they have drafted the contract. Under the employer's requirement, contractor's warranty of design, they are again bringing fit for purpose, which means you cannot run away. And then they added in whatever impracticability, unsuitability at contractor's own cost. So when you read a contract at pre-bid, I don't think it's how much expert you are. It's not easy to see it from a risk perspective that how the clause can be factored. And that is why I thought of giving this and highlight you to understand and go into a deeper level. Is the technology a solution to even snip out those? Now, whatever I have seen recently, AI application of contract document, I found it's very, very basic, rudimentary, which for an experienced professional in their mind, we don't have to read. When I read a contract, even before you know that these are the risks. But what we possibly have to look, and that's why Chaitanya when spoke to me, I was trying to tell him that I'm looking something much deeper. Otherwise, I know as an experienced professional what are the risks in the contract.
Right.
So we have to see from this identification of risks from a contract document, categorization of risks depending on the severity. So I'm not sure whether technology can solve that problem. Third-party approval risks, I feel it's a very, very important risk, which is actually underestimated. And I feel this can be a disaster in some projects when there are a lot of third-party approval. Examples is dedicated freight corridors. Why, if you see any dedicated corridor project still get built in India, it is 2x time they took. Whatever the scheduled time was X, every job is completed in 2x. One of the reason is this third-party approval, the way it was drafted in the contract. By default, there will be a problem. Design and quantity related risks, it's very technical in nature, but some of the contract documents are so ambiguous, it invariably lead to a disputes. Commercial risks, I'm not too sure how much AI can able to understand if there's a balanced billing schedule or not, and thereby the risks arising out of cash flow. It's a deeper subject to thought through, but yes, sometimes it hits hard if you are not able to predict that properly. In execution risks, I basically clustered under 3-4 categories. Supply chain related, if there is a funny clauses, that could be risks. The DLP obligations and how your DLP has been defined, that could be a potential risk, and there could be a risk related to the commissioning of a project also, because many of projects there are third-party approvals required. Example, any airport, Navi Mumbai airport, until DGCA approves you, whatever dam works you have done, the airport will never go to get commission. And DGCA can be crazy because they come up with many things at the end of the project. Now, just to give a framework for what are the kind of things you need to see in a contract document under this category of risks, pre-construction, ROW, primarily you should look whose obligation it is. That's the question should get raised. Whether AI have to ask that question, whose obligation? Is a client obligation? You know, you are little risk-free from your perspective, from a contractor's perspective. It's a client obligation if it is explicitly defined. Is that abstracted, obstructed ROW is being very clearly defined? Fine. So you know that, you know what you are married with. Environment, a very, very tricky subject in India. Whose obligation? If it is a client, you know you are risk-free. If it is not client, then it's a major risk. And then by what time environment clearance has to be obtained? Is it before declaration of the commencement date of the project or after? So these are the right of tricky questions you need to raise to understand the risk framework. Utility shifting. Is it a client scope or contractor scope? If it is a client scope, you feel you are risk-free, but your schedule may get affected. You never know at what pace they will remove the utility. If it is a contractor scope, you know you have a control, but there are some other dimension of challenge. Okay. Then of course the utility shifting being a kind of you're interacting with some other people, there'll be always some risk of scope clarity and stuff like that. And the objective is that a human brain, what because of paucity of time at the time of bid, can read all this document, identify this, or can the machine will able to help us? But what can be questions to be framed is the main. Same is for the client related. I said it is more of a behavioral issue, so I'm not too sure whether a technology can able to help, but maybe with the cases being built, possibly there could be some predictabilities. Various interpretations. Naturally, there is an overstep designs tendency by customer or the consultant always in a EPC project. Various material related source approval. There could be third-party people who are supposed to approve some of your material sources. Plan setup approvals in railway projects. Without RDSO approval, you cannot proceed for many things. And RDSO is, we all know how efficient that body is. Other approvals, some projects has got some tricky clauses of construction methods. And in fact, for all railway projects, if you have to build anything on the existing railway embankment or existing railway corridor touching the existing bridges of railway, you need to go to the Construction Railway Safety Commissioner for getting CRS approval. Without that, you can't even start it. And many of the commercial decisions lies with the consultant and the client for your approval. But by and large, I think this bucket of thing is more towards behavioral rather than kind of contractual or technical. This is, as I said, is most important thing in my opinion. It's important to understand how many people are there beyond your contract. When you talk about third party, the definition is something like that. Between contractor, client, and consultant, this triangle has signed a contract. So everybody has a legal ramification there. You can write each other letter. You can build your case for your DRB, for your arbitration to the court. But here we are talking about a party who is not signing your contract, but may dictate your terms in forms of general arrangement drawing approval, or maybe design approval, or maybe some no objection to construct on their canal or a channel, or on their road, like PWD roads on which you have to build a structure, or maybe some regulatory bodies from which you get an approval. But none of them are signing your contract document. Now, if your contract do not have a clarity that how much time after my submission to them they will approve, it's an open-ended risk. And believe me, in one of the projects I have been there in DFCC, not only the GAD NOC, the stuff, they changed the scope of the project. Because what at the time of bidding, what is envisaged to be a one-span bridge on a irrigation canal has become two-span bridge, because they said that my future widening has to be now considered. And that is the type of risk. So one has to understand, and I feel that here the machine can do wonders. Because he just to figure it out, how many parties, what is the exact scope, is the timeline defined, what exactly is the scope, who is going to get them? All these questions are to be raised to understand it. Again, design and quantity is a very technical subject, and maybe in the other infrastructure space like power projects, this could be a little different. With my experience of transportation infrastructure, bridge construction, elevated corridor, or for that matter, road and highways, even for a railway corridor, these are some of the top towards are major risks, because geotechnical dictates your foundation design, and foundation largely comprise of 35 to 40% of the total cost. So it's a major risk from if geotechnical goes wrong, your entire foundation design can be different and thereby a huge cost impact. Similarly, for a river bridge project, hydrological challenges are very much. You have to know the high flood level that dictates the entire hydrology, the clear height requirement from the water level, and a lot of scoring calculations will depending on the hydrological calculation of a bridge. So these are all some of the very, very critical risks. And I'll take you through what exactly in the contract it is defined and why it will be a risk. As I said, scope and specs ambiguities, I'll show you some of the cases, how ambiguous the scope is, how contradictory each of the clause, which can be fatal during the execution. Commercial related, as I said, I'm not very sure. You guys have to think, is it possible for AI or a technology to understand a billing schedule's nature, affecting working capital or a cash flow? Maybe some deep dive is required. Maybe some extra layers may be required. I'm not very sure. Price variation, some of the contract has a funny price variation clauses. It gives the price variation in a manner that it never covered. And then I'll show you some of the tricky clauses. It gives a kind of a disclaimer that if it is not covered, if through the formula it is not covered, don't come to me. You're supposed to price that as a contingency. And many of the projects, it happened. And through that clause, client get their protection. When in between in high-speed railway in 2021, post-COVID or during COVID, the steel prices has gone over the roof. It's an unprecedented scenario where the WPI of steel was not covering entirely the way the price has escalated. But once we go to a high-speed rail saying that it's an unprecedented scenario, nobody can price in a competitive bid, they said, I can't tell. You sign the contract where it is written that you're supposed to add the contingency. It's your business call that you have not added it. I believe you have added it because you have read this contract and you have signed it. So I believe in a scenario like that, you might have done a scenario planning and priced. So rather, I may ask you, pass on this money if there is a de-escalation. That is the kind of argument they put forth. So that's the kind of challenge. And then other adjustment to contract value, very, very underestimated risk, but can be devastating if the contract clauses are not nicely structured. One example of such thing, I will tell you that I have that example, but since I'll not show you here, let me speak out that thing, very, very funny thing that, you know, the government royalty in most of the contract on earth and minerals, minor minerals like aggregate or earth, okay? It's a substantial chunk because state governments, one of the biggest revenue earners are royalty. And they used to increase it every year or within 2 years timeline. Now, if your changes legislation clause do not have that provision that change of royalty has to be reimbursed, you are not going to get it. It's a major contractual dispute in the Supreme Court till date. Sometimes they say that your escalation formula is covering those kind of breaks. That's the kind of argument somebody put. So those are the things you need to see then in changes legislation. There is one more case where in DFCC contract, they have mentioned that a change of tax rate is reimbursable. Suppose if your tax rate was 16%, it become 18, you are supposed to get 2%. If 16 become 13, there is a reduction, right? But it adds extra one line that it is applicable for materials used in the permanent works. Here is a scenario where the excise duty has increased in diesel. Remember, diesel is still under VAT. It is not under GST. So it is not covering, such a case is not covering under the overall claim of a GST, VAT versus GST. So diesel is such an item where excise has increased. When I submit the claim, client citing that clause saying, diesel has never been a material, it's a consumable. And why did you show me the design is directly used in the permanent work? My clause says it's a material used in a permanent work, which is directly going into the work. Diesel you have not put into a concrete. It enables you. This is the argument they put forth. You own the case in DRB and arbitration and getting the money, but that's a different thing. And that is the fine line of drafting. Believe me, intelligent people draft this contract. कोई सोच लिया तो इस scenario बनेगा and has drafted such a clause to put forth that argument. Imagine the mind how it works.
Very interesting.
Are those live examples? If it is time permit, if it is a physical presentation, I could have shown you to understand, but I'm just putting through whatever is in mind so you will understand this is interpreted so differently. Supply chain. When I came to supply chain, I could understand it. Before that, I had not understood this could be also a potential risk. In a contract, again, I'm giving an example instead of reading all this thing that in a contract, it defines that you are supposed to put a kind of membrane, which has to be minimum 3 mm width. Okay. In India, nobody manufactures more than 1 mm. It's like that. I'll just give an example. Only one agency might be packaging, the rest of the agencies don't. So it's a risk. You're creating a monopolistic situation. Similarly, in one of the contract, it talks about that you're supposed to use stainless steel reinforcement to protect corrosion. And the kind of asking rate of stainless steel requirement monthly to complete the project is such, India don't have a capacity to produce so much. Now, I'm not very sure. How do you establish this kind of risk? So I'm not too sure about whether a machine can able to predict such risks and whether you need some other additional data points to join the dots and assuming that it could be the risks. But just given an example of supply chain risks which can come. Interfacing risks, like third-party approval, is a very, very tricky one. You need to very clear that whether every interfacing agencies are defined in your contract document or not, because many of your activities starting from design to execution depends on each other. Example, in a railway projects, if there are 3 packages, civil track is one package, electromechanical is another package, signaling telecommunication in another package. Each one need to marry to each other because each other's inputs are required at the design stage. For a station layout or a yard layout, you have to depend on electromechanical and signaling guy. For your station buildings, in your civil contract, you have to depend on the load requirement of electromechanical and signaling people, as an example. So you need to know very clearly what is the interfacing scope. And I believe the technology can very well crack this one, because you read the document, you figure it out, the interfacing, number of interfacing agencies, how their obligations are aligned, how it is linked with your schedule. Is it very clearly defined, or it's again an open-ended like third-party approvals? Those are the questions one need to raise to understand. Testing DLP, as I said, that DGC as example I've given you upfront, similar type of railway safety, commissioner of railway safety necessarily required to inspect a railway project before declaring commercial operation. But these are again third-party people. They are not signatory to the contract and can derail the delay the completion. Your overhead can go like anything just because of some of their observation. And then many of the contracts nowadays comes with latent defects. Reading wise, it's nice, but it could be fatal. You never know what is the definition of latent defect. So I think that's the kind of bucket of thing. I have spoken you here. I have just 2-3 examples, 2-3 buckets I'm covering. One is, of course, this pre-construction bucket. ROW has an obligation, 4 different contracts I compared here. The first one is the MORTA standard EPC. The second one is Ministry of Railway standard EPC. The third one is Ministry of Railway Western Dedicated Freight Corridor. And the fourth one is a private airport like a Navi Mumbai or Delhi or Bombay, whatever we have built till then. Green color means some of these clauses are good in the contract from a contractor's perspective. That means the risks are addressed to that extent. It's not open-ended for us, for a contractor. The rates are very dangerous because it's an open-ended kind of clause. So when I talk about the first one, it has evolved. That's why there are so many green. It talks about appointed date, which is nothing but the commencement date of the project, when you have been given 90% of the ROW. It's a great clause from contractor's perspective. It de-risks yourself. And it even talks about that there's a dim termination. And it even talks about some time and cost compensation if there is a delay. It's fine, there is an upper limit, that's a debate. But at least there is something than nothing. When you talk about the MOR standard EPC, it again actually graduated now after DFCC's debacle. Because recently, I think 3 years back, they come up with this Ministry of Railway standard EPC document, marrying the learnings of DFCC and the learnings of MORTH. They have come up with a relatively decent document with many of the risks being captured, which was not there in the Western DFCC or Eastern DFCC. So that's the learning from the Ministry of Railway. So they again come similar line that this much percentage is available, though the dim termination is still not there. And they have increased the upper limit of time and cost as compared to the Ministry of Road Transport to the extent of 5%. This is the worst clause, worst contract. No commencement date is linked with this ROW, nothing. There is nothing linked. The moment you submit PBG, you sign the contract document, JICA being a funding agency has approved the loan, the commencement date will be declared. There is no time and cost compensation explicitly written in this contract document. One may say it's an advantage to contractor. I can raise an unlimited claim. But we all know the Indian legal system, contract enforcement condition. Everybody will get retired, whoever is claiming. By the time you realize the money. So it's better that a 5%, 1% clause is there in the contract, rather than having nothing and saying that I can have an unlimited opportunity. Airport being a private, I'm talking about the private airports here only as a contract document. Nothing is clear in the document, but by and large, if I don't build Navi Mumbai in time, Adani's revenue will get affected, right? So naturally, the ecosystem is a little efficient driven. So all these clauses, even though it's not there, I don't think it's a very, very risky in nature. See, From a contract perspective, theoretically, yes, it's an open-ended, but ecosystem drives there because everybody wanted to start generating the revenue from the airport. So now the question is that, can AI identify which contract having ROW rigs? Since I'm comparing these 3-4 contracts, when AI will really evolve and run through a document and then in picture and then he can capture. Yes, this is a riskier contract, this is less riskier. Through this kind of comparison, I'll show you the kind of questions possibly to be structured in order to understand this. Environment clearance, as I said you, should be always in the client scope. If it is not there in your scope, it's a very risky element. It's not easy to get an environment clearance to the ministry if it is in a private party scope. Government to government, things are very different. So it's important to see when the EC has to be obtained. Is it in the Ministry of Road Transport? It's least riskiest because it talks about even issuing an LOA, it will be done. So you are risk-free. Here it talks about before declaration of the commencement dates. Still you are risk-free. Here also it talks about before declaration of commencement dates. So it's again risk-free. So in all sense, it is there. In private developers, again, it is not very clearly mentioned in the contract, but no airport can start if you do not have an environment clearance. So in that sense, it is not there. But nowadays, there are projects coming up where environment clearance is in contractor scope. And believe me, 1.5 years contract has been signed, project has not yet started. 18 months is over. And God knows when it will happen. So again, in all contracts, the clause stipulates the project cannot be commenced without obtaining. How to do AI interprets? Then again, if a contract do not have such provision, the alert mechanisms are like EC is a risk to this project. Utility shifting, as I said you upfront that in some cases it is in client scope, in some project it is in contractor scope. In either way, it could be good or bad depending on how it pans out. But I'll give an example. I'm not going to the hyperlink because it might lead to a technical challenge. But let me explain you on a case of an utility shifting. In a document, the contract clause says you're supposed to remove the utilities which will obstructed within the ROW for your construction. Okay. While the scope of utility is defined under Schedule B, and there is an entire gamut of utilities list given: gas pipeline, water pipeline, electrical line, many things as a part of Schedule. And in Schedule A, it shows that existing scope of the project, which is not the future scope, the existing scope, it is also defined. But in the utility shifting clause, it says you're supposed to remove which is obstructed utility. Now, when we did the survey in the project at the time of pre-bid, we could envisage the obstructed utility for my construction zone are much lesser. I don't have to remove the gas pipeline and water pipeline. These are beyond my construction zone. But the trickier part of the question is that because the scope of utility is defined under Schedule B, which forms the bid price, because you are supposed to price based on Schedule B scope. The moot question raises, if I don't remove by citing the utility shifting clause, that obstructed utility, can client come up with a negative change of scope tomorrow saying that Schedule B talks about this, Schedule B talks about this, and that means you are supposed to price it in your scope. I may give an example, but utility shifting scope says that you are supposed to remove only obstructed utility of the construction zone. But you see, that would be always the debate. So, question is, can AI go to the deeper level to extract the nature of risks due to ambiguities in the utility shifting clause versus this conflict of Schedule B, which defines the scope of the contract and the price of the contract? So these are the questions one need to understand, that how things are to be addressed. So on a ROW, any condition precedent and commencement dates, is there the linkages? That is what the machine should also ask. Time and cost compensation provision in the contract, is it defined? Any provision of deemed permission in the worst case scenario? For environment, it is in whose obligation, whose scope? What are the various aspects of EC covered and is whose scope? Is there the timeline defined that when EC has to be obtained? And in case not obtained, what are the recourses available in the contract? Utility shifting, again, chartered, unchartered, demarcation, how many utility owners, possibly gas pipeline, water pipeline, electrical, what are the nature, how difficult is the utility shifting could be? Is the timeline of shifting defined in the contract? Again, in case of delays at the end of the day for a contractor, we must know whether it's a time overrun clause or a cost compensation clause. So these are the relevant questions and the framework at which I possibly should raise, understand, and come up with an LR, bring up with the LRs under the pre-construction risk. Now come to the third party. I will again say that, in my opinion, it is very, very tricky. And here a machine has a much bigger role to really scan through, understand, and everything. For example, again, the road contract of standard EPC, relatively the third-party approval scope is less there. And the good part is that NHI or Ministry of Road has learned over a period of 20-25 years that many of the projects earlier in the Golden Quadrilateral was delayed because the ROB on the railway overbridge is not constructed in time. Those are the major factors. What they did in the contract document nowadays is that they took the response on their own head. And they have linked it the declaration of the commencement date as a condition precedent. If you do not get the ROB GAD cleared from the railway authority, they will not declare the appointed. So it's a great clause, directs, though the time and cost compensation in case of delay is there is not that, but they will never going to declare your commencement date. So that thereby it directs yourself. So it's a learning curve through which NHA has evolved themselves. Ministry of Railway, as I said, because of the bad learning of DFCC, has really evolved in their contract document. They also now come up with which exactly are the third-party approvals involved. Some of their timelines are defined, even though the construction commissioners, railway safety commissioners timeline is not defined. They also has come up with a time and cost compensation of delays. So they're linked, as I said, are learning from the Ministry of Road Transport document, and because of the very, very fatal learning of the DFCC projects. This is the worst case. Nothing defined. Nothing defined in the contract. Everything is open-ended. Nobody knows when, where, how much time, how many revisions this will be cleared. The whole project scope third party has defined. In a 5,000 crore projects, my change of scope technical variation of 3,000 crore.
Wow.
70% of my scope has changed in the new alignment in that project. And a majority are dictated by this third party. The roadway authorities are telling, when DPR was prepared, it was 2-laning road. Now Gujarat is a developed state. I have to build it 6 lane. So abhi 3 span karne ka. Bridge 1 span to abhi 3 span bana. So irrigation canal is telling that I need an extra road along the canal for maintenance purpose. Earlier we never thought, now we are thinking, so increase. So imagine if that is the kind of, if those are the people who are dictating the scope, so the fate of the project has gone beyond your control. It is not even in the client control, neither in a consultant control. You can't structure a contract like that. We have presented this issue to the JICA basically, that because they are the funding authority, and this is the reasons, one of the major reasons of delay. And I think it's very important that what a human brain we could not able to envisage before it hits hard, that how this contract, subtle nature of these clauses can affect you. It's dangerous. In an airport, as I say, many of these contract clauses are not good, but as I say you in a private airport, the ecosystem is a bit different. Even though you have clauses like that, materially you may not get affected. At least as of now, nobody affected, because the larger risk for concession is not to earn revenue. So they will do everything to see that things get happen.
Right.
As I said, the third parties are not signatories. That's the first weakest point. And if it is not defined by client that this is the timeline they have to delay, both contractor is in a very, very on the receiving end. The client को क्या होगा? तो होगा ठीक है, बनेगा नहीं, 4 साल का प्रोजेक्ट 8 साल में बन रहा है. How much government is bothered about? They will tell contractor was inefficient. But the contractor's finance तो खत्म, will be dead. So I think I'll not repeat all this thing. As I said, many of these are third-party RDS. So I'll be given an example. One of the project got delayed by 9 months just because RDS was not approving something. Because they never envisage a private party can build slippers. In DFCC first time it is given because earlier all rail project it is railway they supply the slipper to the contractor. The first time DFCC it's a design build EPC project, slipper has to be manufactured by the contractor. It took 9 months to amend Ministry of Railway guidelines before RDS approved it. So again, third party, they are not part of it, but they are supposed to approve all this track system. So I think similarly, completion certificate issued. I said you DGCA, I said you CRS. These are examples that how the completion of the project can derail, and if you not able to envisage, and rather the purpose of envisaging all these risks at the time of bidding is you can raise the questions in the pre-bid at least. They may not give you an answer, but you safeguard yourself for a DAB or arbitration future that you raised all this in the pre-bid. The answer was vague. It is as per RFQ will be the predominant answer. But we are not responsible for that. It is client who should ask why they give us a vague reply. So that's how at least it can protect you in some form. If not in very explicit form, but at some implicit way you may get an advantage. So again, as I said, the structuring is that raise the right questions. Raise the right questions while you read the document. Can the machine do that? How many third parties are? Who are involved? How much time is it required? Is the cost compensation, time compensation defined for the third party delay? Once you raise this kind of right questions from the contract document, I think you can start figuring out the risk and thereby alerting everybody. And that's again, I'm telling you that it's no more knowing typical risks. We all know that. These are the deeper subjects which the machine should do. Until that does it, otherwise it will not serve the purpose. The whole point, what I'm trying to, in fact, my LinkedIn post was supposed to address this issue only, that simple risks we all know what will going to hit us.
Right.
As I said earlier, geotechnical, you see the kind of clauses, geological risks and hydrological risks, all geological hydrological data provided as per bid document are indicative and for reference purpose. They have taken a legal protection. Don't come up with me that I bid because of my geotech I have given in the bid document. It is for reference purpose. You need to satisfy yourself. Then they added the clauses. There is no provision of any claims and cost compensation arising out from the impact on design and thereby on quantity for change in geological and hydrological condition during detailed design stage. Very, very clear. This is standard MORTH. Same, similar lines, only English got changed. The intent remains same. In the recent Ministry of Railways standard EPC. WDFCC, only the English is different again. Very clear. I have given you for indicative reference purpose. Everything is there. Contractor shall do. Employer shall not entertain any claim in case the contractor encounters data different that indicate in the data. HFL data given in the bid document are for only reference purpose. So, if you believe on them, you got great geotechnical data as part of bid document. You don't read this document properly, you feel client has given uski document में है मैं उसी से bid कर लिया, soil के जगह पे पता चला rock आ गया, पूरा foundation design will go for toss. Forget about difficulty of construction, your cost can be 5 times. Believe me, on all structures, 30 to 40% is the thumb rule is the foundation cost. You go to the client telling that, sir, आप ही तो bid document, we have given all this data. I've gone and he show you the clause. Well, I've not seen this clause. I'm married to this contract. Tell, I've been very clear. It's indicative reference. I told you, आपकी कुछ difference data आएगा तो cost के लिए मैं कुछ नहीं करने वाला, time भी नहीं देगा. आप नहीं पढ़ो, which is your fault, which is not my fault. I am very clear from day zero. It's your problem that you have not read the document. So, what machine has to read it, interpret it, tell that yes, don't just blindly follow what is given in this document. There are different disclaimers. So be alert. Accordingly, do your own due diligence. If there is no time to do due diligence, don't bid the project. If the sensitivity of hydrology and the geotech is so high of the projects in your cost, here I'll try to toggle to this. Let me see whether I can do it. Hyperlink. Good. Are you able to see or not?
Yes, I can see. Yeah.
It's a nice example. One example, you understand what's the interpretation of the same document can be a hayward. It's a very big bridge, India's largest cable stayed bridge. Is a contract of that. It says the cable stayed span detail below, that means this table, is the minimum span requirement agreed upon by the wildlife authorities and may increase as per final approval of the concerned authorities. Copy of the wildlife proposal under consideration of the conservatory has been uploaded along with the bid documents and mitigation measures and this and that. Then comes to this underlined bold. No change in scope shall be applicable in case the increase in span length as per the approved granted by the wildlife authority. Details of the proposed span arrangement is under. You may remember this span configuration. If you have, some of you may not understand, 6 spans of 60-meter length each, 1 span of 300-meter length, 1 span of 700-meter length, the longest bridge in India, single span. 1 span of again 2 approaches of the cable stayed of 300 meter, and then there is 9 spans of 50 meter. He's saying that ये सब change हो सकता है, पता नहीं क्या हो. 1,000 crore, 1,500 crore is the bridge cost. Now you're saying that I can change anything. Remember, it doesn't say change. It's an increase. It is more fatal. If it is a change, I may reduce it by somehow and then not pass on you the negative change of scope. If it is a variation only, then it's an increase only. डिक्रीज होने से इस क्लॉज के आधार पे तुमसे क्लेम करेगा, बोलेगा मैं तो इंक्रीज का केस में बोला, मैं डिक्रीज का केस तो इस पे बोला नहीं है. It's a subtleness of this thing. See what kind of footnote on this table. It says all these are minimum specified span. मतलब box culvert मतलब 2 by 2 का मतलब होता है width of the culvert is 2 meter, clear height is 2 meter, जिसके अंदर से पानी जाएगा. फिर बोलते ये सब मिनिमम है. फिर ये बोलते हैं जितना लोकेशन बताया ये सब एग्जैक्ट लोकेशन पता करना पड़ेगा बाद में आपको. Then he says the actual bed span arrangement of this should be driven on the basis of detail with the contractor in accordance with the specification and standard. Any variations in way span arrangement specified in schedule B shall not consider change of scope. अच्छा एक तरीका से increase नहीं बोला, variation बोला. So you have to interpret it. बढ़ेगा नहीं देगा, घटेगा तो नहीं लेगा. But reality में घटेगा तो आपको बोलेगा दोने देने के लिए. But you have to be smart enough to use the difference between increase and variation. And the machine should do that. Don't know how, you people have to understand. This is a subtle nature of thing. Adding to that first slide of this bridge, what I've said, Spain, if it says variations, you have some leeway. It can be plus, it can be minus. If it says increase, you are in a back foot. You never know if in case of a decrease happen, they may ask you the money. The last one is a very, very interesting example of how specs can be interpreted differently. Difficult for you guys to read. I'll just summarize the case. The clause में बोला गया था that you have to follow IS 2911 for the testing of piles, which is a code of practice for design and construction of pile foundation, load test on piles. उसी clause की एक सब clause में बोला गया था number of tests कितना करना है. In a pile are nothing but a foundation of any bridges. Okay. It talks about that there are 3 category of tests: initial load test, routine load test, pile integrate test. So बोलता है initial load test 2 numbers for each structures. Routine का भी बोलता है not less than 2% of total piles, not less than 2 in number. That is how it is defined. मतलब initial भी बोलते हैं 2 हर structure में करना है, routine भी बोलते हैं 2 in number. यानी indirectly 2 करना. अब इस क्लॉज के आधार पे IS 2911 पढ़ोगे and these are the relevant clauses. It talks about small size projects where the pile scope is less than 1000 number, minimum 2 tests करना है पूरे प्रोजेक्ट के लिए. जहां पे large scale project more than 1000 number of piles are there, a minimum 2 tests for first 1000 number piles and 1 test for every 1000 piles after that. Basis on our scope of that project, these are the numbers, the rate portion. इसके बेसिस में 532 नंबर टेस्ट करना पड़ेगा. IS 2911 के हिसाब से 14 टेस्ट करना पड़ेगा. Impact is 50 crores. When you go to the case that you said that 2911, the engineer saying, read the clause properly. Testing of pipes carried out as per procedure late. I didn't say the numbers. I said the methodology defined in this contract. Why are you referring numbers? Referring numbers के लिए तो मैं अलग clause दिया. This is what the outcome. You eventually do God knows 500 odd numbers. पता नहीं कितना time गया, कितना खर्चा गया. DAB तक पहुंचा, DAB has given in favor. Like this is illogical. So I think that is how things can go wrong in interpretation of scope. And that's why I thought of giving you this example. I am not very sure. Such deeper issues, how did you able to know? There are ambiguities, there are subtleness. Increase की meaning अलग होता है, variation की meaning अलग होता है. Specs as they given you an example, there are plethora of such examples. It can be a 2-3 hour session of giving live examples. कैसे कैसे चलता. The fact is that if the contract has explicit clauses of geotech, क्या बोलता है, indicative बोलता है, क्या बोलता है, sacrosanct बोलता है, these are the questions to be raised. Hydrology का भी same चीज है, क्या बोलता है contract. And change of scope, very tricky. I'm not very sure whether a machine can understand a span example what I've given or the culvert example I've given, how the contract can, how the risks can come out during, can it able to predict that these are the clauses, these are the drafting which are riskier because of this reasons. I think that's what I think I have covered. There are 3 other buckets. There are several examples, but I think that will take a long time. So just give you to sense, giving a sense of understanding that what should AI look for. It's not the mundane fundamental things.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think it was very, very insightful. And I personally was able to relate to a lot of these things based on our previous discussions also, with regards to AI and potentials in how some of these very subtle things, I mean, that simple thing of increase versus variation itself can change the contract and it can change the outcome of the contract.
Yes.
So, I mean, it was amazing for me. And I think there are a lot of folks who would be very interested because I have a few people here who are working on the project management side of things or who are working on the space of, understanding AI, using AI for different context basis. Even, for example, when you mentioned about drawings, about the span, reading that span or reading that drawing in specification. So there are a few guys who are trying to solve for that as well, where they are able to read and extract enough information from the drawings to be able to maybe compare, with the spec document and say that your drawing says, say, 10 mm, your spec says 6 mm, which one to follow. So this is definitely happening down the line, and I'm sure that some of these guys would love to even interact with you to kind of share what they are building on. So happy to open it up for questions. I mean, if anyone wants to ask anything or wants to share their thoughts on how they are trying to leverage AI for contracts or for the risk management that they are doing on. You can just raise hand or maybe unmute yourself and ask a question.
I would like to ask a question. Yes.
Yeah, hello Riaz. Please go ahead.
Yeah, in fact, it was an interesting discussion.
I'm not able to hear him.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah, now you're audible. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for such an good discussion, good interaction, and deep insight. In fact, each point you were discussing with passion and with deep insight. In fact, I would like to say what I realized that many a times you raised a thing that how machine will understand and how machine will read, or how AI can be implemented. So I just have a thought into it that. If the clauses say suppose a contract is under discussion or under kind of we want to analyze a particular contract, so if we try to mark certain clauses of the contract which need to be compared with respect to the IS. Say the last point which you said about IS 2911.
Yeah.
So in that context, I am just trying to analyze the thing that there are many clauses in the contract. Even earlier, also what you spoke about, have a kind of relationship with the IS, what IS speaks. And with that respect, if we are able to mark out without the help of AI, first of all, manually we can mark out and then ask AI to do a contextual bridging. Okay, what the IS says and what the clause demands. As Chaitanya was also saying that 6 and 10 bars. So, you know, drawing references from that and drawing references from 2911 discussion, I would just like to pour in that if anyone working on this area, at least we should have a manual AI kind of interface wherein the relevant clauses are marked and then given to AI for a analysis part. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's why I'm telling that somewhere I think the manual intervention may be required. For example, the escalation clause, for example, or for that matter, even the billing schedule. I'm not very sure that how did able to AI do without a manual intervention? Well, it's not coming in my mind. Tech folks may be able to know because they know the deeper understanding of the AI. Like as I said, with DFCC contract, it is one of the worst billing schedule. And believe me, in the high-speed rail, why the project is going at a high speed, apart from Mr. Modi's intervention at every point of time at PMO's monitoring, the main reason is that Ministry of Railway has really learned from DFCC's debacle. And they have come out with a brilliant contract document to a large extent. Only 10% of the document has some challenges, which possibly is in another dimension, which is not envisaged during the DFCC project. But they've come up with a brilliant billing schedule also, knowing that if you don't support working capital, see, in contracting, the fundamental thing is as simple as that. You are building an asset for somebody else. Why should I fund for them? Why should I fund for them, client? It is their asset. My working capital, my cash flow should be such that I should always have a kind of a positive cash flow. Maybe initial few months fine here and there because of my overheads and other things. So I'm not very sure that the billing schedule are defined in the contract document. But can a machine able to interpret it? Or there is an, again, as Mr. Riaz says, a manual intervention versus a machine's combination might happen. And, or maybe what kind of structuring required that this portion manual input has to be there, then only the machine takes over and start interpreting it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix of both, because initially, while the system is able to read the sentence, like you said, the subtlety might be missed. So initially, maybe marking those clauses out or marking some key areas out, right, to kind of say that, okay, these are typically my potential risk areas that are there. That can help the AI, especially for your organization, for any organization that matter, to kind of maybe fine tune it, right? Again, talking.
Chaitanya,
Yeah.
In fact, I was of the opinion that in front of every clause, just kind of describe that clause, or put it into a specific bucket, that this particular clause has to be compared with the IS, this particular clause has to be compared with the X this thing considerations, that is the project management part or the billing part, and then specifically give the AI the task to evaluate those clauses instead of the AI interpreting the whole contract.
Mm.
Reduce the work for the AI. That was what
See
I was
what
trying to tell him.
Mr. Riaz is saying, I can correlate it. For example, a PV formula case. Okay, we know that every time the WPI indices may not cover the true cost. So the alert manually should be the check the WPI movement versus the real cost movement. Suppose if the cement and steel are based on WPI, is there is a correlation of WPI? Because again, there are two scenarios. Historically, when you analyze the data, WPI in an inflationary say is never been covered. But in a deflationary phase, when the real prices are falling, WPI is very good because there is a lag effect of fall. And thereby, in a deflationary case, it's an always advantage having a WPI formula based PV. While in an inflationary scenario, it's the reverse. So if you can create a train manually and then bring the AI, maybe that's the way you have to look for a hybrid sort of thing. And over a period of time, possibly it will graduate to that level, because at the more the data, obviously it become more refined kind of thing.
Correct. I think Janine has a question. So please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity, Chaitanya. SK Dattaji, this was a fantastic session. And there are two things I would like to add to the forum. Okay, so AI is under training stage. It's an infant which is learning how to grab like a baby, grab and walk and stand. But it's very smart than what we are anticipating. But for construction and infra, the lack of data, okay, whatever so SK Datta ji has gone through multiple contracts and he is able to read those line items in a much deeper manner than what I was able to read when I went through the same curriculum, same context of data. Okay, so what usually as a project manager we do is whenever there is an arbitrary statement which does not have a limit, okay, like claims, etc., we just put a number to it that it is up to 5% of contract value. The increase is variable up to 1%, 2%. Whenever there are such things, we try to put a number to it, find a cost of it, find a probability of it, and put a risk cost to it, like what risk governance does. Okay,
Mm.
but contracts team now and globally project management has, especially in construction infra, has gone so much deeper into that the contract itself takes away 50% of our entire workload. Okay, and here the AI models are not going to be generic chat GTPs or of the world. They are going to be specified construction AI models which would be trained by L&T on its own internal data, etc. Enterprise versions would have much finer risk mitigation and risk probability and costing methodology. For example, like what I did yesterday, my AI model went ahead and studied the general condition of contract and put in a cost estimate. Okay, what is the cost estimate for each clause to comply with? It's not only the statement, there is to be some man hours going behind those statements, that okay, my team member is going to monitor it and comply, etc., as small as energy efficiency clause, etc. Okay, so what effort is going behind those clause? AI is able to read it. I know they are completely off the chart, they are not as accurate. In certain cases they are very accurate because somebody has went ahead and gave more data to the AI tool.
Correct.
So, like Sir said, 4 or 5 years down the line, they would be able to do it much better. But the blockchain from where the are going to get originated and integrating with the AI tech, I think we are going to see this future very closer than 5 years. Okay. So
Yes.
the next 2 3 years is very critical for us as professionals because this transition is going to go very fast.
Correct.
Okay, and our projects are not going to get closed. Something which we started this year might get completed in by 2030, but the tech is going to get upgraded very fast. Okay, by 2030, in midst of the contract, we'll have a much powerful versions. Okay, so kudos to C Tribe for organizing this, and I would love to participate more and collaborate more via Project Management Institute, etc., and do more of these learning sessions so that we as humans are cutthroat where the technology is headed.
Absolutely. I think you rightly hit the point on the head that data is definitely lagging. And I think Sir also recognizes that very well because when we had an offline chat, he pointed that first thing, and that's where there is a risk also with regards to industry versus an organization, because an organization like Larsen and Toubro has very rich data set because it has done so many projects which may or may not be available offline. So if they you know put their heads to saying that we will annotate all the past contracts and we will assign the notes of risk that each of these points gave me, and if I'm able to map my learnings, my arbitrations and my contracts, they can build a very powerful solution in house. And I think something like that, I don't know how we will open it up, but there has to be something that comes out where we can build something more generic. But again, it's a it's a tool that will help people distinguish in businesses, right? So very interesting times ahead. And like you said, I mean, initially 2 3 so even in 2 3 years you might see the contracts being generated by AI. So if that is being generated, the AI already understands the terminology that's coming in, right? So now that there is already an imprint of that AI generating that contract, then reading becomes much more easier. So it's a very interesting situation. We don't know where it will head to, but these are all hypotheses that we are thinking of. Thanks, Janin, for joining in. Anyone else? We are already a little over time, but if anyone has last few couple of questions, maybe in 2 3 minutes, we'll kind of wind down.
So Chaitanya, I've just dropped my LinkedIn. Let's just connect. I have something to discuss so that if such sessions are there, we can collaborate as a PMI and distribute PDUs also. So if somebody who's in project management can also learn, because the topic is very much relevant, and we can offer a collaborated approach.
Sure.
And would love to host you, sir, at our sessions. Okay, so let's just connect and take things forward.
Absolutely.
I don't know. This idea, this whole contract management thing has come when I start interacting with some of the professors in IIT Mumbai. And again, I said them that initially they've shown a lot of interest in IIT Mumbai to take a proof of concept. I don't know, maybe the institute has its own problem, challenges, it is slow. But I feel that this one of the DFCC contract what I talk about is an ideal examples of an application of AI to test it out whether this is possible or not. And I even offer to them that because I know the outcome, so I know what is the garbage in, garbage out result the AI should give to test out whether it is really working or not. Because I've been seeing, I have done my risk review with the management during the pre-bid time. I could envisage 3 risks. And my post-bid risk review to the same management is 15. And they laughed at me. That you only pre-bid. Fortunately or unfortunately, I bid the project and went to execute it. And believe me, that maturity is not there. Even the best of the contract stream also to emphasize this kind of clauses. It's a very hard way of learning. And that's why I offered to IIT Bombay that I have enough data because I have the document with me.
Yeah.
And I know what is required.
Yeah.
So why not create a proof of concept? Let's try out third-party risks only because that's what very subtle in nature. Can AI able to do that third-party risks from this document? Because there are ample ammunition. If we can now relate during execution, these are the contractual interpretations.
Mm.
Is it possible as a POC kind of thing? I think if somebody is interested, the data is there. That much I can tell. Because both ins and outs, I know what has happened, and the contract document is there, how it has evolved, and stuffs like that. Possibly that will help actually, and I don't know if there is any other way to really test it out. That जो हम सोच रहा है वो possible है या नहीं है.
Yes, sir, possible to definitely है. As you rightly said, you have the data set which is gold mine for any startup who is building in this space, because understanding that context is very important.
और एक चीज नीरन जी बोल रहा है ना, that in the industry you might have many data within Larsen and Toubro also many data. Do you have a structured framework?
Yeah.
Because for that IIT Kanpur course I built it, मतलब मैं तो थोड़ा modify किया इधर because of that course.
Yeah.
So it took 3-4 months for me to collate everything.
Right.
To give a comparative across contracts, and because I have spent a lot of time as a tendering head.
Yeah.
So some of this thing is on my mind that because क्या clause था और किस तरीके से. So I could put the examples, live examples. You have seen it's a 48 slides. I have not covered all these things. There are so many 100 hyperlinks. But on the other day, I was seeing that there could be a technical challenge, so I skip kar gaya also. But the other day, everything has a very sharp example.
Right.
And one can understand that whether the machine can really get into that to understand it or not is the real question.
Absolutely. Exciting, sir. Very, very exciting. Thanks a lot again. Really, genuinely, very, very insightful for me, and I'm sure for a lot of folks. And Yeah, thanks a lot. And thanks everyone for joining on a Saturday evening. Now you can go and party.
Right. Chalo.
Have a
Bye.
nice day. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.